appreciate so much your faithfulness to join with us in these studies that we have been doing on home improvements. Tonight, we're going to be dealing with a very sensitive subject. It's a subject sometimes that people get a little bit, what can I say? They feel kind of stressed when you start talking about money. Okay. And but anyway, we're gonna look at it tonight. We're gonna talk about the home's finances, Someone has well said, money isn't everything, but it's way out in front of whatever is second. Kind of think about that for a minute. Not everything, but it's way out in front of whatever is second. Probably that statement was made in a joking kind of a way, but it certainly accurately describes the attitudes that many people have when you start talking about money. Many people, their attitude toward money, they dream about it. They dream about it. And by the way, you don't have to be rich to dream about money. Probably poor people dream about money more than rich people. But anyway, they dream about it. They drive themselves to get it. Many times people in a desire to have wealth, they will wreck their families. They wreck their own personal health. They're driven by this desire to have money. And then once they get it, what do? Well, they're kind of like the old miser that sits down, with his gold dripping between his fingers and, hey, it's mine, it's all mine. Yeah. And so they hoard it. But the reality is that in the end, regardless of how much you may accumulate, it never really satisfies. And the reason it never really satisfies is because it doesn't last. It doesn't last. In fact, that's why the wise man said this, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse number 10, he that loveth silver, okay, he loves silver, but he's not going to be satisfied with it. He's not going to be satisfied with it. Now, we have seen that God's desire is for the husband and wife to be, what was the term we saw? God's desire is that they be one flesh. Remember that? He wants them to be one flesh. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. And please understand that means more than just having sexual relationships. It means more than that. Spiritually speaking, it means that a marriage and God's design, that the marriage is to be the total commitment. It's to be the total sharing of your total self with your spouse. That's what one flesh means. That's what it means. And this is a commitment that is made, remember the marriage vows? Till death do you part, right? It's that commitment that is made. And this thing of total sharing of yourself with your spouse certainly includes the aspect of money. In other words, the happily married couple should be one flesh, first of all, in their possession of money. Let me just put that very simply for you. That means no separate bank accounts. Now, I know that's a big deal here. But no separate bank accounts. Unless you're like Ginger and I, we have so much money, it takes two banks to hold it all. No, I'm just kidding. But no separate bank accounts. You are one flesh, okay? That includes in your money. So no separate bank accounts. You also should be one flesh in not only your possession of money, but also in your attitudes about money. Your attitudes about money, and these attitudes will be seen in the way that you budget, in the way that you save, and then also you should be one flesh in the managing of money. In other words, how do you spend it? How do you invest it? That sort of a thing. And this is where usually the problem is discovered. This is where the problem in many marriages is discovered. The American Psychological Association, called the APA, they actually noted that money issues, listen carefully, money issues contribute to about 30% to 50% of divorces worldwide. Money issues contribute to that. It may not be the cause, but it contributes to the cause. It is a factor. It is a factor. And certainly that falls in line with the local statistics that we have here at home. According to a 2020 survey by the Ministry of Social and Family Development, the MSF, it was noted that 1 in 3, that's 1/3, 1 in 3 of the divorces in Singapore were actually linked to financial issues. It's linked to financial stresses. The bottom line is, folks, that no matter how much a couple may love each other on their wedding day, they will not escape. They will not escape those tensions. They will not escape the conflicts that are caused by finances. And there's 2 reasons why that is true. 2 reasons why that is true. First of all, it is true because of the fact that all of us are sinners by nature. No, all of us, no matter how much you may love each other, the fact is both of you are sinners by nature. And as a result of that, all of us are pretty much selfish, right? We're pretty much selfish. So this problem comes because all of us are sinners by nature. Secondly, it also comes because all of us were raised differently. All of us were raised differently. You see, whether we like it or not, the attitudes of our parents about money, the attitudes that our parents had about money will have a huge impact on your attitudes about money. How you were raised, the setting in which you were raised financially, that's going to have an impact on how you handle money, how you think about money. You see, we all know that some parents they're very liberal. Some parents are very liberal. They're generous in their giving. Generous in their giving. We got a lot of generous folks in our church. And I praise the Lord for that. We mentioned a special need, and offerings will start just coming in designated for this particular need. We have a lot of generous people. Praise the Lord for that. And some people, they're just that way. They're very liberal in their others. They're very tight-fisted. Very tight-fisted. Some are raised in a home where their parents were extravagant. They're extravagant. In other words, they spend money with little thought of saving something for that proverbial rainy day, the rainy day that's going to come. And so they spend with little thought of it. Basically, these are the kind of people, they live from paycheck to paycheck, okay? They live from paycheck to paycheck. No real thought of saving something for the rainy day. But on the other hand, there are others who, they're very careful, very thrifty in their spending, okay? There are some who are liberal, some who are extravagant, and then there are those who are just highly structured. They're highly structured. They have a budget. They keep the budget. They follow the budget. If I could use the term, they do it religiously, okay? No deviation. They got to keep the budget. While others basically live quite freely. As long as they have money in their pocket, the old saying, it burns a hole in their pocket. And so, I got money. I got to go shopping. I got to spend it somewhere. And so, so there are some who are liberal, some extravagant, some who are structured. Bottom line, most of us, and I realize, we reach that certain age, boy, I can't wait to get away from mom and dad. When I get married, it's going to be different. I'll never say this. I'm going to be my own man. And then invariably we get away from mom and dad. And what do we start doing? We start acting just like mom and dad. We do what we have learned to do at home, okay? And so because of the fact that we're raised differently, we begin to follow these different ideas about the use, the spending, investing, saving of money. And as a result of that, we began to face some issues. And it's for that reason that we need to understand, okay, this is what mom and dad believe. This is how mom and dad practice. This is how they did it in their house. But we're going to do it God's way. We're going to follow the biblical principles about money. We're going to handle money the way the Bible says that we ought to. And by the way, it's interesting to note that the Bible has a lot to say about money. Did you know that? It does. Has a lot to say about money. And it gives some very clear instructions about the handling of money. So this evening, we're going to look into God's word, and I want us to notice just a couple of things together. First of all, let's notice the biblical principles. The biblical principles. However, before we get into that, there are three facts that we have to understand that are foundational. Three foundational facts that we need to understand before we can really comprehend the biblical principles, okay? So let's begin with these facts. Number one, everything belongs to God, okay? Everything belongs to God. Deuteronomy chapter 10, verse number 14, the Bible says this, behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens is the Lord's thy God, the earth also, and all that therein is. Everything. You go out and look up in the sky, everything you see up there belongs to God. You look at this earth, everything that belongs to God. It's his. By right of creation, it belongs to him. It belongs to him. We find the same thing in Psalm chapter 24, verse number 1. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. What does that mean? That simply means everything you find in the earth. All the gold, all the silver, all the precious stones, all the diamonds, all the jewels, all of the oil, all of the gas, all of the riches that are found in the earth, all of it, it belongs to the Lord. The world, not only do all the things in the world, but all of the people belong. Did you get that? And all the people, they that dwell therein. So, number one, we need to understand the simple principle, everything belongs to God. Number two, there's a second principle that is foundational, and that is this. Since everything belongs to God, everything that we have comes from God, right? Everything that we have comes from God. Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse number 18. Thou shalt remember the Lord thy God. Now notice it. Remember the Lord your God. Here's why you need to do that. Because, or for, it is he that gives you power to get wealth. Now, some people say, well, I work hard for a living. I earn this money myself. Well, who gave you the strength to work? Who gave you the wisdom to know how to work? That all comes from, so it's ultimately, bottom line, it's God. It's God who gives us the power to get wealth. That's why, again, 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 12 says, both riches and honor come of thee. Riches and honor comes from God. Comes from God. So everything belongs to God. Everything we have comes from God. Number three, that simply means that we are the owners of nothing. What is your net worth? Zero. I don't own anything. We are owners. We're owners of nothing. Everything we have belongs to God. Therefore, we are merely what we have. We are merely the stewards of it. We are the stewards of the stuff God has entrusted to us. We're stewards of it. We're stewards of it. And of course, you understand what the Bible says, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2, it is required in stewards that a man be found faithful. Let me just tell you something. Think about this. One day, as believers in Jesus Christ, all of us are going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ, right? We understand that. One of the things that will be discussed when we stand before the judgment seat of Christ is, how did you use the stuff that I gave you? How did you use the stuff I invested in you? I entrusted to you. Did you use it to satisfy your own lust, your own desires, or did you use it for my honor and for my glory? How did you use what it doesn't belong to you, you're only a steward. How did you use it? Yeah, that's one of the issues that we'll discuss when we stand at the judgment seat of Christ. So these are the three principles. They're foundational. These are the three principles that we need to understand. And everything we have belongs to God. And once we understand that, then we're ready to move on. And there's two things that we need to think about as we consider this thing of the money, the material goods that God has entrusted to us. First of all, we need to think about our priorities. Priorities, very important point. We need to think about our priorities. In Matthew chapter 6, verse number 33, the priorities are given. But seek ye first the kingdom of God. You remember what Jesus said, John chapter 3, except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. So the number one priority in the heart and the life of every person is to make sure they're born again, to make sure they have a relationship with God. To make sure they have a place in that kingdom of God. So seek first, number one priority in every life, make sure you're saved. Make sure you've been born again. Seek first the kingdom of God. And then it says, and his righteousness. In other words, after you receive Christ, after you're born again, then your number one priority changes. Now your number one priority is to be like Christ. His righteousness, to be like Jesus Christ in your attitudes and in your dealings. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then here comes the promise. And all these things, if you go back and read the context, all of these things is a simple reference to all of those things that are necessary to sustain your life. All of these things will be added unto you. We need to always remember here that even though God has promised to supply our needs, he has never promised to supply everything we want. And many times we think that, what I need, what I want, that's what I really need. Yeah, but no, those two things, our needs, our wants, they are seldom the same. They're seldom the same. And so we need to understand that we must have the right priorities in our life. Must have the right priorities. Then there's another issue, and that is the issue of our contentment. Our contentment. You remember in the Old Testament, in the law, in Exodus chapter 20, verse number 17, as the Lord God was giving his commandments to the nation of Israel, here's what he said. He said, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Now, why is that such a big deal? Well, the reason is simply because men covet because of the fact they're not satisfied with what God has given to them. They somehow have the idea God owes them something, that God is holding out on them. And because they don't have everything their neighbor has, they begin to look at that with eyes that are covetous. They begin to covet what their neighbor has. And so the Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy and basically gave him two things to consider, same two things we need to consider tonight. First of all, he gave a command to obey. a command to obey. And here it is. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse number 8, having food and raiment. That's food to eat, clothes to wear. Okay? Having food and raiment, let us be therewith, what's the word? Content. You have food to eat, you have clothes to wear, be satisfied. As long as there's a good color TV, there's a nice car, that and we add all these other things, right? No, just food and raiment. Be content with that. Be content with that. And the reason why this is so important, it's clearly stated for us. Colossians chapter 3, verse number 5, he says, mortify your members. That simply means put them to death. Put your feelings to death. Mortify your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, that's wicked, sinful lust, evil concupiscence, that's evil desires, okay, and covetousness, which is idolatry. It's idolatry. You see, that's why the Apostle Paul says in Hebrews 13, verse number 5, let your conversation be without covetousness, but be content with such things as you have. Be content with that. Be content with that. So we need to understand this command to obey, simply to be content. To be content. But not only does he speak of a command to obey, the Apostle Paul, in writing to Timothy, he also talks about a pitfall to avoid. A pitfall to avoid. 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9 and verse number 10, but they that will be rich. In other words, their will, the driving force in their life, the driving desire, and they want to be rich. They that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. You take a man who's driven by a desire, his will is, I'm going to be rich. Invariably, he begins to say, I'm going to be rich no matter what I have to do to get it. And that opens up a whole Pandora's box of danger. That opens up a whole box of difficulties and temptations, and it causes a man to drown in destruction and perdition, because here's why. Look at the next verse. For the love of money. Now, please understand, money is not evil, okay? Money is not evil, but the love of money. When money becomes the number one priority in our life, it's the love of money that is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after. They coveted after it, and as a result, they have erred from the faith, and they've pierced themselves through with many sorrows. No wonder the Apostle Paul ends this section in verse number 11. He tells Timothy, hey, listen, flee these things. Flee these things. It's dangerous when you begin to develop the wrong kind of attitude about money. However, if we're going to put God first in all things, and that's our desire, we really want to put God first in all of these things. And yet we still are lacking, okay? We're trying to do right. We're trying to do everything that is said here, but we're still lacking some of the necessities of life. It may be because of the fact, while we understand the principles, we're not following the guidelines. See, there are some guidelines that the Bible gives to us, and three biblical guidelines that we need to understand. If we really understand the things that we've already talked about, but we're still lacking those needs to survive, then perhaps it may be that we need to understand the very basic guideline to work harder. To work harder. You remember the wise man told his son, Proverbs chapter 6, verse 9, 10, 11. He says, go to the ant and consider her ways. Go to the ant and consider her ways. Go to the ant and learn that poverty always comes to those who are lazy. Go to the ant and understand that those who are slothful will never be rich. They'll never be rich. In fact, in Proverbs chapter 10, verse number 4, the wise man said, he becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand. It's a lazy hand. He becomes poor that dealeth with a slack hand. But the hand of the diligent maketh rich. Hand of the diligent maketh rich. Proverbs 14, verse number 23, in all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. What's that talking about? Well, you know, there are many people, they don't do any work, but they talk a good game. Man, you know, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to invest here, and I'm going to invest there, and I'm going to do that, you know, and they talk, but they never do anything. They got the talk, the action is missing. And that's exactly what, in all labor, there is profit. It makes no difference whether you're the CEO of a company or whether you're flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Makes absolutely no difference. In all labor, there is profit. But if all you do is talk about it, you're never going to accomplish anything. You never accomplish anything. Bottom line, the Bible never condones laziness. The Bible never condones slothfulness. And in the marriage relationship, this is primarily this thing of supplying for the family. This is a responsibility that is primarily given to the man. It's primarily given to the man. Remember 1 Timothy 5:8. But if any provide not for, notice the pronoun, his, masculine. If any provide not for his own, especially for those of his own house. There it is. His own house, he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. It's primarily, it's the responsibility of the man. Of course, this raises a question. Is it okay for a wife to work? Is it okay for a wife to have employment outside of the home? Is that okay? And I'll just tell you right now, I believe it is. I believe it is okay as long as it does not hinder her from fulfilling her God-given duties as a wife. Remember, the Bible says the older women are to teach the younger women. Remember that? And what are they to teach? Well, here's what they're to teach. Titus chapter 2, verse number 5. The older women are to teach the younger women to be discreet. Simply means to be self-controlled. They're to teach them to be discreet, teach them to be chaste, that is modest in their dress and their behavior. Teach them to be keepers at home, good, obedient. Remember we talked about submission? Obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. In other words, as the keeper of the home, it is primarily the job of the wife to be caring for her husband, be caring for her children, to be caring for her house. And you remember the virtuous woman, Proverbs 31? You remember she did it all. She did it all. She worked in the home, providing for her family. And she also worked outside the home. Remember, we saw she made investments. She sold her goods in the market. She did all of these things. And the thing you need to remember is simply this. If a wife can fulfill her duties in the home, and work outside of the home to earn extra money for the good of her family, not to build her own little bank account, but for the good of the family. For the good of the family, then there is no problem, but her priority must always be family first. Family first. So we need to work. We need to work hard. We're running short. Maybe you need to work harder. You need to work harder. Number two, if you're doing all the things that God has commanded and you're still running a little bit short, it may be that you need to not only work hard, it may be you need to remember God. You need to remember God. You remember Proverbs chapter 3, verse number 9, honor the Lord with thy substance and with the first fruits of all thine increase. The idea here is talking about the tithe. Talking about the tithe. And you need to remember, when you think about the tithe, you need to remember the Bible makes it explicitly clear that the tithe it's holy. It's a holy thing. And the Bible also clearly, Leviticus 27, verse 30, not only is it holy, it belongs to God. It's His. And so therefore, to keep the tithe for ourselves, to not give it as we should, to hold on to it, to keep it for ourselves, simply means that we are, Malachi chapter 3, verse 8, we are guilty of robbing God. Guilty of robbing God. And by the way, I know there's some discussion about this, so let me just go ahead and as Don Knotts would say, let me just nip it in the bud, okay? Let me just go ahead and tell you, this applies to the Old Testament as well. People say, oh, well, that's Old Testament, doesn't apply today. Well, I beg to differ. I beg to differ, and let me show you why. Let me show you why. You remember in the Old Testament time, the priest at the temple, they were maintained by the tithes and the offerings of the Israelites. The Israelites had a system of offerings that they were to bring. They were to bring their tithes, and then they brought other offerings as well. And all of this they would bring, and it was through these offerings and these tithes that the priesthood would be maintained and the temple would be maintained. And the Apostle Paul then in the New Testament, he refers back to that point. He refers back to that Old Testament principle. And here's what he said. 1 Corinthians 9, verse 14. He says, even so. In other words, in the very same way, even so hath the Lord ordained. It's not a suggestion, it's a commandment. It's something God has ordained. It's not something He has left up to our whim, not something He has left up for us to decide. It's something He has ordained, and here's what it is, that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. In other words, just as the priest and the temple were maintained by the offerings of the Jewish people, the church, the pastors are to be maintained by the tithes and the offerings of God's people. That it's as true today, it's as relevant today as it was back in the times of the Old Testament. And so because of that, there are three facts that are still true. There are three facts that are still true. Three things that are still in force today. First of all, there is the consequence that needs to be considered. The consequence, what I'm talking about. What am I talking about? The consequence is simply this. Those who rob God are cursed with a curse. Malachi chapter 3, verse 9. Those who rob God, they're cursed with a curse. Now, what does that curse look like? What does it look like? Well, we find a good example of it over in the book of Haggai. Haggai chapter 1, verse 5 and verse number 6. Here's what that curse looks like. It says, now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Ye have sown much. You put in a lot of effort, put in a lot of time, put a lot of energy into it, but you bring in little. You eat, but you don't have enough. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. You clothe you, but there's none warm. And he that earneth wages to put into a bag with holes in it. Can't you picture the guy who said, well, I'm not going to give the tithe. I'm going to keep it for myself. I need it more than God does. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I don't have anything. So I'm going to keep the tithe. I'm going to keep the tithe. And so he starts putting it in his little bag of savings. But the problem is his bag has a hole in it. And as he's walking along, his money is dropping away. Can I just tell you something? Nobody ever gets ahead by cheating God. Nobody ever gets ahead by cheating God. It's a bag that has, it may be that the holes are unexpected medical bills. It may be that the holes are unexpected expenses that you come up with. It may be those holes are unexpected other issues that require a payment of some, and you're getting this money and you're dropping it in your bag, and yet you're never getting ahead. That's the curse. That's the consequence. You're cursed with a curse. Never pays to rob God. You never get ahead robbing God. And not only do we see the consequence, we also see that there's a challenge that is given here. Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. The challenge is simply this: prove me now. This is God talking. Prove me now. In fact, this is the only time when God gave a command, and then he said, now check me out and see if what I'm telling you is true or not. See if my promise is really real or not. I'm going to tell you a story. I might be a little long tonight. I'm just warning you. Ginger's grandpa, loved to hear his testimony. He got saved out of a Presbyterian church, and went to Presbyterian church for years, was a deacon, but he wasn't saved. And a guy came to Princeton, North Carolina, Baptist preacher, Carl Woodbury, started Grace Baptist Church. Grandpa, grandma, they went there, they got saved. And grandpa's just a farmer. And so Brother Woodbury, after Grandpa got saved, now said, Mr. Herman, you need to tithe. What's tithe? Well, it's 10%. You give it to God. Belongs to God. You give to Him. And Grandpa said, I can't afford that. He said, I'm in this cycle right now that I plant my crop in the spring, I take care of my crop, I harvest my crop in the fall, I sell my crop on the market. I take the money and I pay the mortgage for my land to the bank. I buy things that my children need for the winter. And then when spring comes again, I have to borrow more money to buy seeds to plant a new crop. He said, I'm in this cycle. I can't afford to tithe. And so Brother Woodbury said, well, Mr. Herman, here's what the Bible says. Try me. Test me. See if I'll do what I promise. And Grandpa, you have to know Grandpa to appreciate this. Grandpa looked the preacher right in the eye, and here's what he said. He said, I'll give God 1 year. Can you imagine that? Yeah, I'll give God 1 year. And he did. That year, he planted his seed, tended his seed, reaped the harvest at the end of the year, sold the harvest at the marketplace, paid his mortgage on his farm, bought everything his kids needed for the winter. And by the way, they had 9 kids, so that was a hump right there. Anyway, he provided everything they needed for the winter. Come spring, for the first time ever, he did not have to borrow money to buy seed. And he never borrowed money again. Never borrowed money again. God kept his word. God kept his word. That's the challenge. Prove me. See if I won't do what I promised. Check me out. See if I'm faithful to do what I've said I would. So there's the consequence, there's the challenge, and then there's the confidence. The confidence. And the confidence is found in verse number 11 of Malachi chapter 3, and it's simply this: the devourer. The devourer that eats up all of your money. Remember that bag with the holes in it? Those things that devour your money. The devourer that eats up your income will, God says, it will be rebuked. It will be rebuked. It will be rebuked. And so we need to remember God. We need to remember God. Things not having a hard time making ends meet. Work hard. Remember God. And then let me give you one more. Spend wisely. Spend wisely. Now that sounds so simple, doesn't it? It sounds so simple. And to be honest, it really is. It really is simple. And yet the sad fact is that many people ignore a very basic principle. Here's the principle. The principle is when your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep will be your downfall. I mean, that's simple, isn't it? When what you are spending out is more than what you are taking in, then trying to keep everything going is going to result in a downfall. Dave Ramsey he's a personal finance expert. In fact, I recommend his book. If you haven't read it, it's called The Total Money Makeover. It's an excellent book. But Dave Ramsey, he was absolutely right. Here's what he said. He said, debt is a financial cancer. It does not matter how much money you make. If you are in debt, you are financially sick. Yeah, debt. Terrible thing. Terrible thing. Why are people in debt? Because they don't spend wisely. They don't spend wisely. Sadly, many young people enter into marriage, and when they enter into marriage, they really don't have any financial plan. So they overspend, and they build a mountain of debt. Normally they build a mountain of debt by using credit cards, using plastic. And I realize that credit cards are a necessary evil in this day in which we live. However, you need to understand that when credit cards are used to finance a former lifestyle, in other words, a young married couple says, we just got married and we want to have all the nice things that we enjoyed when we were living with mom and dad. And so they go on a spending spree and they buy all of these things that they enjoyed when they were living with mom and dad, and they never stop to consider it took mom and dad 20 years to accumulate all that stuff, but they want it right now. Instant gratification, the curse of our age, right? Instant gratification. And so because of that, they're using credit to finance a lifestyle. And that is the most dangerous thing. Or they'll do this. They'll use credit cards in order that they can keep up with their peers. In other words, their neighbor got it. Their friend at work got it. So I want to have it. And so I want to keep up with them. In the States, we call it keeping up with the Joneses, okay? Yeah, I want to have everything my peers have. And so what happens is, well, here's what basically happens. They begin to spend money they don't have, to buy things they don't need, to impress people they don't even like. Okay? Yeah, that's kind of what they do. They want to keep up with their neighbors, keep up with their peers. And that is the most dangerous thing. And because here's why. You probably know this already. At least you should. If you carry a credit card, you ought to know this. Credit cards with their high interest rates of up to 25% or more have a potential of digging a financial hole for your family that you may never get out of. In fact, that's why Warren Buffett, he's a well-known investor. Those who are involved in investing, you've heard the name Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, here's what he said. He said the most important thing to do if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Okay? You find yourself in a financial hole because you've been using credit. Well, stop digging. Put the credit card someplace where you can't reach it when you're downtown and something's on sale and you really would like to have it, you know. And I didn't bring my credit card. Well, you just saved money. Okay. Yeah, just stop digging if you're in a financial hole. When it comes to using credit cards or any other kind of credit, there actually is a biblical principle that you need to be aware of. There is a biblical principle, and here's what it is. Proverbs 22, verse number 7. The borrower, that's the one who takes the credit. The borrower is the servant of the lender. The borrower is servant to the, in other words, when you are in debt, the salary that you make from your job, the money that you get paid as your paycheck, it's not for you. You're working, you're laboring, you're getting a salary for your creditor. It's not your money, it's their money. It's their money. Now, I realize that some will say, well, yeah, it gets too bad. I'll just call a lawyer and file bankruptcy. It is legal, you know. I'll just call a lawyer and I'll file bankruptcy. Well, it may be legal in the courts of the land, but God doesn't look at it that way. Here's what God says. Psalm chapter 37, Psalm 37, verse number 21. Here's what God says. He says, it's the wicked that borroweth and payeth not again. It's a wicked man who makes a debt and doesn't pay it. It's a wicked man who doesn't honor the debts and repay the debts that he has made. Make a debt and refuse to pay it is a sin, and you can mark it down. God will never be able to bless those who are dishonest, those who rob him, and also those who rob others that they owe money to. God cannot bless that kind of a thing if we do not pay our bills. Bottom line, as Christians, even in the way that we use our money, we need to follow one guiding principle. Even in the way we use our money, there's this one guiding principle we need to follow. And here's what it is. It's whether you eat or drink or whatever you do. That includes how you use your money, right? Yeah. Whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do all for the glory of God. In order to avoid the stresses that financial debt will always bring to a marriage, may God help us to understand these basic principles, these basic guidelines. And I know we've covered a lot of ground and we've covered it fast. But I hope that these things will stick in your mind. They will resonate in your heart. And I hope that you will determine as a family unit in your home that you are going to handle your finances in a way that truly honors and glorifies God. Because if you don't, you're going to be headed for a hard road of trouble and difficulty, not only with your spouse, but with God.